Europe didn't announce this. Australia didn't brag about it. But in March 2024, something massive happened. Australia quietly became the EU's fifth largest trading partner, overtaking Russia. And if you travel to Europe, hold an Australian passport, or watch global markets, this changes everything. Here are 5 ways Australia just became Europe's most important backup plan, and why almost no one saw it coming. But wait, before we begin, please subscribe to ensure that you never miss out on any of my essential stuff. Comment "I subscribe" below, and I will personally welcome you to our community. With that said, let's get started. Let's start with the one resource Europe can't live without anymore: lithium. See, Europe bet its entire future on electric vehicles. By 2035, they are banning all new gas car sales. Every car manufacturer, BMW, Volkswagen, Renault, is racing to go electric. But there's a problem. You can't make an EV without lithium batteries. And Europe, they don't mind lithium. So when sanctions hit Russia and Chinese supply chains got too risky, they turned to one country that controls 47% of the world's lithium supply: Australia. According to the International Energy Agency's 2023 Critical Minerals Report, Australia produced 61,000 tons of lithium last year, more than the next 3 countries combined. And EU lithium imports from Australia, they surged 340% between 2020 and 2023. Let me give you a real example. Marco Bellucci, Italy. He runs an automotive parts company in Milan that used to supply Fiat. For years, he sourced metals from Russian importers. Stable, predictable, cheap. Then 2022 hit. Sanctions killed his supply chain overnight. Factories were stalling. Contracts were breaking. He was about to lay off half his staff. So he pivoted. Hard. He partnered with lithium battery suppliers in Perth. Costs went up 22%. But demand tripled. Now he's hiring, not closing. And this created something unexpected, a skilled migration surge. If you're an Australian engineer, geologist, or work in green energy, your EU work visa approval rate jumped 58% since 2022. Europe needs your expertise, and they are fast-tracking you in. But here's where it gets messy. Australia controls the lithium. But China, they control the refineries. So Europe didn't escape dependency. They just swapped Russia for a new risk, and this time, it's 14,000 kilometers away with a Chinese bottleneck in between. That's when things got strange. February 2022. Russia cuts off gas to Europe. Factories shut down. Energy prices explode. Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, entire industries are on the edge of collapse. So Europe scrambled, and one country quietly stepped in to fill the gap: Australia. According to the European Commission's energy report from Q4 2023, Australia's LNG exports to the EU increased by 120% between 2021 and 2023. Today, Australia supplies 18% of Europe's total LNG imports. That's up from just 7% in 2021. Let me introduce you to Annick van der Meer. She's an energy consultant in Rotterdam. For years, she advised Dutch factories that ran on Russian Gazprom pipelines. It was cheap. It was reliable. Then overnight, blackouts. Her clients were staring at shutdowns, billions in losses. She had 48 hours to find a solution. She found it in Australia. Emergency LNG contracts, longer shipping times, higher costs, but factories stayed open. Today, she runs a €12 million logistics firm specializing in Australia-EU energy routes. Her entire business model didn't exist 3 years ago, and this opened a new travel corridor. Perth to Amsterdam direct flights, up 40% in frequency since 2023. Energy executives, maritime engineers, freight specialists, flying back and forth constantly. The Oxford Institute for Energy Studies confirmed in 2024 that Europe's LNG terminals are now designed around Australian delivery schedules, not American or Qatari ones. But here's the catch. Australia's LNG export capacity is maxed out. When winter 2025 hits and demand spikes across Europe, someone's going to be left in the cold. Literally. and European travelers are starting to notice. Energy costs are climbing again. Hotel prices, flight fuel surcharges, heating bills. This isn't over. But this move triggered a chain reaction. Ukraine used to be Europe's breadbasket. Then the war started, and Australia quietly stepped in to fill the gap. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization's 2024 trade database, Australian wheat exports to the EU rose 89% in 2023 compared to 2021. Australia supplied 4.2 million tons of wheat to Europe last year, double pre-war levels. Meet Luca Rossi. He owns a bakery chain in Barcelona. For years, 90% of his flour came from Ukrainian mills. High quality, low cost, consistent. March 2022. Supply chain severed. Flour prices exploded 67% in 8 weeks. His margins collapsed. He was bleeding money. So he switched to Australian wheat imports via Mediterranean shipping hubs. The quality stayed high. But logistics? That added 18,000 euros a month. He passed the cost to consumers. Bread prices across Spain spiked. And this created an unexpected opportunity for Australians. If you're studying agriculture or agronomy in Australia, you can now fast-track EU work placements and research visas, especially in drought-resistant farming programs. Applications from Australia to EU agricultural institutes rose 73% since 2022. The World Trade Organization confirmed in 2024 that Australia is now Europe's third largest wheat supplier, a position it never held before the Ukraine conflict. But Australian farmers are starting to worry. Because Europe's demand is so high, domestic Australian bread prices are climbing. And Aussie voters are asking, why are we feeding Europe when our own cost of living is spiking? The backlash is building. But this wasn't just about food and energy. For decades, Australia had one playbook. Mine it, ship it to China, get paid. 85% of Australian exports flowed through Chinese ports and manufacturers. Then 2021 happened. Diplomatic tensions exploded. China imposed informal trade sanctions on Australian goods. Wine, barley, coal, lobsters. Blocked. Australian exporters were in freefall. So they built a new highway. Straight to Europe. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics 2024 trade report, Australia's exports to the EU grew by 28 billion euros. That's 30.5 billion US dollars between 2020 and 2023. EU trade with Australia now exceeds 100 billion Australian dollars annually, the fastest growth of any Australian trading relationship. Let me tell you about Sophie Tan. She runs a rare earth minerals export company in Sydney. For years, 85% of her sales went to Chinese manufacturers. It was her entire revenue stream. Then China cut her off. She had two choices, collapse or pivot. She chose Europe. Direct contracts with German tech giants. BMW, Siemens. She relocated half her team to Munich. Now 60% of her revenue comes from EU clients. She travels monthly between Sydney and Germany. Dual residency. Business mobility visas. Entrepreneur fast tracks. And she's not alone. Australian companies registered in the EU increased by 34% since 2021, the highest jump from any non-EU OECD country. If you're an Australian entrepreneur or tech specialist, you now have access to expanded business mobility visas and fast-track permits in 12 EU countries. But there's a geopolitical risk no one's talking about. If China decides to pressure Australia again, or if tensions escalate in the South China Sea, Europe's new supply chain could collapse just as fast as the Russian one did. And that brings us to the most secretive shift of all. Trade is one thing, but behind the scenes, something much bigger is happening. A quiet military and intelligence alliance is forming between Australia and Europe. According to the European External Action Service's 2024 Strategic Partnership Report, EU-Australia security cooperation agreements increased 150% since 2021. Joint naval exercises in the Indo-Pacific now include Australian, French, German, and Dutch forces. 5 years ago, unthinkable. Meet Commander James Whitley, Royal Australian Navy. For years, his entire career was built around the ANZUS alliance with the United States. Pacific-focused. US-led operations. Then 2023 hit. He was assigned to EU-led Indo-Pacific patrols, targeting illegal fishing, maritime security, contested waters. Now he leads joint training missions with French forces in New Caledonia. His career went from Pacific only to global European defense integration, and this opened new pathways. Australian defense contractors, cybersecurity experts, intelligence analysts, now working in Brussels, Paris, Berlin. EU defense sector work permits for Australians rose 41% in 2023. Source: European Defence Agency, 2024. The International Institute for Strategic Studies reported in 2024 that Australia is now Europe's most important non-NATO Indo-Pacific partner, eclipsing Japan and South Korea in joint operations. But this partnership has a cost. Australia is now caught in a geopolitical triangle. Its biggest trading partner is China. Its closest military ally is the US. Its fastest-growing strategic partner is the EU. And if those three interests clash, Australia will have to choose. For Australian travelers, this means uncertainty. Visa policies could shift overnight. Flight routes could be impacted by trade conflicts. Investment opportunities could vanish. Europe is hedging its bets. Australia is walking a tightrope, and no one knows how long this balance can last. So here's the real question. Is Australia becoming Europe's backup plan? Or is Europe just setting up another dependency that'll break the moment geopolitics shift again? And for Australians watching this, are you okay with your energy, food, and resources going to Europe while your own cost of living spikes? I want your honest take. Drop it below.